Question number 7. It is an AO3 and AO1 combination question. And this question is from Soluble salts. A student plans a method to prepare pure crystals of copper sulfate. The student method is given below. Point number 1. Add 1 spatula of calcium carbonate to dilute hydrochloric acid in a beaker. Point number 2. When the fizzing stops, heat the solution with a Bunsen burner until all the liquid is gone. The method contains several errors and doesn't produce copper sulfate crystals. Explain the improvements the student should make to the method so that the pure crystals of copper sulfate are produced. The student use calcium carbonate and hydrochloric acid to produce copper sulfate. Calcium carbonate has calcium as a metal, whereas the required compound is copper sulfate. It needs copper metal. The first error is how calcium carbonate produce copper ion and how hydrochloric acid will produce sulfate ion. In the neutralization reaction, we can't get copper sulfate. If you look in our equation, calcium carbonate reacts with hydrochloric acid HCl. It gives calcium chloride CaCl2 plus H2O plus carbon dioxide. If we want to get copper sulfate, so we can't take this chemical reaction. The student can take either copper oxide or copper carbonate. And the acid the student has to use, that is sulfuric acid, H2SO4. It produces copper sulfate and water is produced. If the student wants to use copper carbonate with the sulfuric acid, it produces copper sulfate, water H2O and carbon dioxide. The student can pick one of the chemical reaction because both of the reactions they produce copper sulfate. After the chemical reaction, the student need to use point number 2 to get copper sulfate crystals. Let's see the model answer. Calcium carbonate CaCO3 will not produce copper for the salt, whereas hydrochloric acid HCl will not provide sulfate ion for the salt. The student should take copper carbonate CuCO3 or copper oxide CuO instead of taking calcium carbonate and sulfuric acid H2SO4 instead of taking hydrochloric acid. Add the solid copper carbonate or copper oxide in the sulfuric acid in the beaker until the solids gets in excess. Now the student needs to use the filtration method to remove the extra solids left in the solution. Heat the solution gently to evaporate the water from the solution until the crystals start to appear. Leave the crystals of copper sulfate overnight to get dried. Our next coming videos are on GCSE Combined Science Chemistry Paper 1H 2018.